it in the chat, I guess. Oh, there we go. Okay. Oh, is Google, you're gonna let Google transcribe it too?
You know,
See what
we'll see what the
happens?
machines come up with. Yep.
Okay, cool. Um, uh, okay, yeah. So yeah, if you haven't completed the Google form, please do that so that we can know. We're going to start putting people in some of the various repos and teams on GitHub. So that's our best way to sort of do that. So again, like as I mentioned, I'll try to get through sort of the updates on our end as fast as possible and like what we're sort of planning for next steps here. And then I'll, if people want to drop off after that, they can, and people can also stick around for just like we'll, I think, promote everybody to a participant, and we can just have answer any questions or have a discussion or sort of whatever you all want to do. But yeah, the agenda will roughly be like, I'll give you some updates on where we're at with stuff. I'm assuming that most people who are here probably have a good sense of that already, just by nature of your interest in contributing. And then I think we're gonna probably talk about how we're gonna break people up into different teams, which is where the actual contribution meetings will happen, and then we'll end with sort of a Q&A. So the big update for you all, which again most of you probably are aware of this stuff already, so I'll try to go through it quickly. Is when Lando first became like sort of popular, it was basically a giant mono repo, which like made it great for me in particular to like roll things out fairly quickly. But we like pretty soon ran up into a sort of a wall when it came to having other people contribute. I think probably the best feedback that we got was people were just scared shitless, to push their code into this mono repo that like controlled everything, because they were afraid that they were going to break, they were going to do something here and end up breaking something in an unrelated place. Totally legitimate, concern. I mean, even I was at the end sort of afraid to do anything because it was just such a large repo with so many different things happening. So we've spent a good part of the last like few years actually breaking Lando up into like smaller pieces. And the idea for this, oh, hi, Steph, to break Lando up into smaller pieces so that we can sort of decentralize, management of the project, just have smaller fiefdoms with ideally with like you all operating as maintainers, so that, we can work on individual pieces of Lando without worrying about breaking the whole thing. And we're not 100% done with that process, but we're pretty close to being done now. That's sort of what the 3.21 beta series of releases is about. I think we have a few small pieces left before we can sort of do that. But just to give you a sense of like how massive Lando sort of is as a project, I think that we could break Lando into even smaller pieces. But right now, the Lando org has 80 different repositories in it, the vast majority of which are essential for running Lando as a project. So I think the idea now is like, let's try to bring contributors on board, find areas that people are interested in, so that we can start doing sort of these decentralized meetings in the different repositories. Ideally, I think each repo will just have its own set of meetings and team eventually, but like we're not going to get there yet. There's 80 repos. So I think our next step is, break into smaller sort of like breakout groups of different teams. And I'll get into that in a little bit more, but that's, sort of where we are with the project generally. We're like ramping up to Lando 4. We've broken Lando up into these 80 different repos. We have this like plugin system now, which is nice. So, the PHP plugin, for example, can like cut a release and it can then be ingested, by other people with this new Lando update command. So we don't have to like roll a whole Lando release, which is what we had to do if there's one small change in one small corner of Lando. So we're pretty excited about this. I'm sure that there's some bugs to work out with some of these new commands and the system generally, but I think, it's probably getting pretty close to us being able to launch it, which I think is why we're having this meeting, because now I think contribution becomes sort of a bigger thing. So the change in development, a large part of that was to enable contribution. So, that's sort of the update on that end. Happy to answer more questions in the Q&A at the end. The other thing that we're sort of thinking about doing too is, as many of you know, Lando is powered to a large degree by donations and contributions. It is a free and open source project. But like at the end of the day, like legally, it's run by a for-profit company. Although I wouldn't say that Lando has necessarily made us profit, but nonetheless, it is a for-profit entity. We've started to explore what it would take to move Lando, or to at least like separate out into a different entity, which is a nonprofit entity, and have sort of all this stuff happen in that space. We've just started that investigation, so it's not 100% whether we're going to do that ultimately or not. But like, I think I can at least say that Alec and I are very interested in eventually getting the Lando organization itself, the GitHub organization, owned probably by some kind of nonprofit entity that all of this stuff sort of happens through. So that's like, we still have to do a bunch of research there. There's a lot of just like legal things that we have to figure out. And even if we are able to do that, this is probably wouldn't happen until next year anyway. But that's something that we're very interested in doing. We're very, especially now that we're engaging more contributors and stuff, it just makes sense to probably be a nonprofit. But we still have some stuff to do. But just an update on like what our thinking is there. So yeah, the final part of the update here really is now just breaking up into different teams. So like all of you filled out, I think, or most of you filled out the Google form, which sort of indicates like, what areas are you interested in, and like what individual projects you're interested in. And sort of based on that feedback, that sort of mapped with what we were sort of anticipating. But based on that feedback, I think it probably makes sense for us to break up into initially 4 different teams. So what we'll do is probably, have meetings, maybe bi-weekly meetings for each one of these teams. That is every other week, not twice a week. I think the 4 teams will basically be like a DevOps team. People who are responsible for like, there's a whole bunch of GitHub actions that we have. The installer scripts that we have now. Aaron has done it. Like, Aaron, thank you. Has like spent a lot of time working on like the Windows version of that script. People are interested in like having us have a homebrew formula and these kinds of things. So anything that's DevOps related, I think that will be one team. So we'll start to invite people to those meetings, and we'll start to assign some tickets. So that'll be one team. The other team is probably just plugins generally. As like you may all guess, the vast majority of interest in that space is around PHP related things. So, the PHP service, Drupal, WordPress. I think the Pantheon recipe got a bunch of hits. So I think what we'll do is we'll start doing meetings for people who are interested in working on plugins. That's, I think, the area that we need the most immediate help. So, people who are, a lot of that is going to be bug fixes. I think, people who are, submitting tickets, and we just need to assign the tickets to people and get them sort of resolved. So I think that we'll probably start with a general plugins meeting. Anyone who's interested in any plugin stuff, come to that meeting and we'll assign tickets. In an ideal world, like each plugin will eventually end up with a maintainer who can then just run the plugin however they'd like to run, with meetings or whatever. But I think we're going to have to increase contribution to get to that sort of place. First, the other big thing that will be interesting for people with the plugins is that we're getting pretty close to releasing what is going to be probably like a backport of our Lando 4 service into Lando 3. So we're going to need to do this whole update of the plugins to get them rebased on these like Lando 4 services, which is what we're going to use actually in Lando 4. So that will be like a big chunk of work that hopefully people can help with. I think like we'll probably try to tackle a couple of like the key services and recipes, so that we can point to like examples of what these upgrades should look like and write some docs around it. And then if contributors can help update, I really want to update the .NET plugin, that's my jam. They can follow a sort of a recipe or template to get those services updated. And I'm happy to talk more about what that Lando 4 service stuff looks like if people have questions in the Q&A. That's basically going to be most of the big features from Lando 4 into like a Lando 3 service that we can use. And that way we can roll out some some of these new powerful features and fix a bunch of long-standing bugs without having to actually release Lando 4. Which brings me to like the third team, which would be like the core team. I don't think that we're going to do any core meetings just yet. A lot of that is on me to just finish sort of the Lando 4, some core stuff and write documentation around it. And I think once we have that, or once that's sufficiently advanced, we'll start doing meetings for people who are interested in working on Lando core itself, which would be the core and core next and CLI repos would probably constitute that space, but maybe a few other pieces would make sense as well. And then the final sort of team is just is sort of like a governance team. I think that we might just do maybe one meeting a month for that. But one of the things that now that we're engaging contributors and stuff, there's I think a necessity to like be a little bit more clear about what the governance structure of Lando is. Right now, we follow the time-tested benevolent dictator governance model, which certainly has some benefits. But I think that if we want to engage contributors and have them take ownership of the project and help out, like we need to have a model that's a little bit better than just benevolent dictator. So, so anyone who's interested, I think, in discussing what the governance model of Lando should be, who's also interested in becoming a maintainer of any of the repositories, or is interested in potentially becoming an officer. We have to define what those offices would be, but like presumably there'll be like a secretary and a project lead and those kinds of things. So anyone who's interested in that sort of governance question, that will be like the fourth team, and we'll do like monthly meetings for that. So just to recap, the next step after this is to just break up into these teams, and those will be, I think, more traditional sort of contribution spaces where we're going to probably just go through issues together. We might spin up a GitHub project, get people assigned to various repos at various roles. Certainly we're interested in finding maintainers for some projects, but I think maybe right now is a little bit preemptive. But as we start to advance those meetings, I think we can start to identify people who are interested in maintainership and start to hand the reins over to some other people. So the four teams would basically be, we'll start a DevOps meeting, that's related to just like the GitHub actions and the distribution of Lando. There'll be the plugins meeting, which I think will probably be the biggest meeting. People are interested in just helping out with PHP and Drupal, WordPress, Pantheon, .NET, all of the like, however many plugins we have. I think there's like 40 of them. And then, the final one would just be the core team, which we're not going to do anything with until that's on me to advance that further. And then just this governance meeting that we'll do monthly. So I think that's most of the updates that I have on my end. I want to try to get through quickly for you guys, so that you can, go on with your day. We appreciate your time. Is there anything that you think that I missed there, Alec? Or maybe went over too quickly?
No, I'm more excited to hear questions from other folks. I think the way we can probably do this is if anybody that has questions, just use the raise your hand feature and I'll promote you into a contributor, and you can actually be talking. Anyone that wants to lurk, or if you need to bounce for work and things, definitely feel free to do so.
Yeah, and if you're planning to bounce now, again, like we appreciate your time, and I would just look for probably another email that has some calendar dates for probably the three teams: the DevOps team, the plugins team, and the governance team. So you can just jump on those meetings, when we do them. But we'll try to schedule them, I think, for the next start doing them the next couple weeks.
Yeah, and I think we'll send it out to everybody, and we'll probably, as teams get more defined, we'll probably have, people that are actually on different teams, and, you're on the email list for that team, so we're not having to bother everybody for every single little meeting that happens as they kind of proliferate.
Yeah, and I think the growth model there, if there is going to be one, is that as soon as teams, I think, probably become sufficiently large, which, like, I don't know what number that is exactly, so I'll say it vaguely like that. Then we can start thinking about breaking teams up into different areas. So, like, the most obvious one to me would probably be at the plugins team. If there's like 20 people in there the first time we do it, we might just want to be like, okay, maybe this actually should be like people who are interested in, PHP related things over here, and then like everything else over here or something like that. So I think like we'll want to try to just like break the teams up into manageable chunks as we go. And yeah, I think the ideal thing would be to end up with, probably teams that might manage like one or two or even just one of the various repos that are in Lando. But like I think that if we could achieve that in the next like year or two, that would be like incredible. But I feel like that's not something that's on the immediate radar. Yeah, so anyone who wants to stick around, stick around. We're happy to just like have an open discussion or answer questions. And anyone who wants to like drop off now, like feel free. No hard feelings. We won't put you on a list. Yeah, just look out for the emails to jump on these follow-up meetings where we can start assigning tickets to people and doing them a normal just like sort of contributor meeting.
I'm going to start promoting people.
Yes, promote them.
Apparently you have to approve the there we go. Sweet.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you
Hello.
did.
Hi, this is Stefano. So maybe I'm the only one in this situation, but I really don't have experience much with Lando. I used a couple of times in the past like weeks. And I was curious about this because I did see some issues. And I'm not sure if you can maybe introduce yourself and talk about Lando, what it is, like the company behind it, the project. I really don't know much, and I was expecting probably naively, but more introduction. And if this is not the time, you think maybe, I don't know, we can discuss another. Do you have other events or meetings?
Yes. Tell you what, Stefano, if you want to, if you can just put your email into the chat. I think the chat's only accessible to us apparently. So if right now, if you could just put that in there, I can follow up with you. Or are you on the Lando Slack?
Yes.
Okay, if you're on the Lando Slack, just message me. I should be on there, Alec Reynolds. If you look around for me in the DM. And I'm happy to like chat with you. But yeah, I think a lot of folks here are probably pretty familiar with Lando, so I don't know if we should go too in depth on it right now. But definitely happy to chat with you more afterwards.
Thanks.
No problem. Let's see here. Anyone else want to ask any questions, participate? Aha, more raised hands. Here we go. Sorry for the
I
delay.
really don't like the school teacher vibe of the hand raising, by the way.
I know, it's very okay. Ethan, I think you were first in line, but we'll let you get everyone in on the action here.
Also, hi, Steph. Nice to see you. It's been a while.
Hey, Mike. It's always a pleasure to see you both.
Yeah, it's you too.
Hopefully that works. Yeah. Okay. Looks like it's working. Hi guys. So these teams look pretty good to me. My question is documentation. Are those going to be the responsibility of the people writing the plugin, like a sub team of that?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah, I think this is a good question. When we sent the survey out, I think we had documentation team on there, which I think like sort of makes sense to some degree. But yeah, I mean, one of the things that we did do, I don't know if everyone knows this, but our documentation site now is actually like 40 different sites that are all sort of stitched together. And the reason why we did do that is so that we could get the documentation for a given repo in that actual repo. I think with the intention there that like, if you're on the plugins team, for example, or just maybe to make it simpler, if there were like a Lando PHP team, like presumably the people on that team would handle the docs for that thing. So yeah, I mean, I think if you're on a team that has documentation inside of it, I think that team should be responsible for that. Whether that's like a sub team within that team, I think that the people in that team, it's up for them to decide how they want to structure that. But there is also just like overarching documentation too. Like there is the actual Lando docs repo, and there is some more like generic documentation as well. So I feel like, that like I think certainly could be its own team, because that could have like more guide materials or like YouTube, tutorials and those kinds of things. So I think it's sort of complicated. I think it's a little bit of both. But I think the expectation, I think the expectation probably should be like, if you're on a team that like controls these 5 repos or whatever, then like you should be responsible for the docs for those 5 things. I think that makes the most sense. But I'm interested to hear your, whether you think that that's a good model or whether we should try something else.
Yeah, that certainly makes sense to me. I know some people are better at writing code than docs and the other way around. So maybe that's a different way of contributing to a plugin. But also think about the governance team here and having some kind of consistency throughout the docs from one plugin to another.
Yeah, so on that front, we did make a custom, like we use VitePress for our docs. We have a custom VitePress theme, which does like provide some like generalized like branding and styling and mechanisms to, I think, provide some level of consistency between the documentation, or the various documentation sites. I mean, that's why it looks like one coherent site, even though it's actually like 45 or whatever different sites. But like, I do think that there's like a higher level question here, which maybe is probably better suited for like down the road in our governance sort of like discussions about like what do we want. Like Lando's now moved into this ecosystem where you do have these various plugins, and I think that there's a question of, to what extent should those plugins, I think reflect some level of consistency. So like plugins that are owned by Lando, like maybe our decision is that those should all have a very like uniform styling and structure and that kind of thing. But now that ideally plugins are more accessible and more third-party plugins come online, like, do we want to require those people to also use our theme, or can they make whatever docs they want? So that's a bigger question that I think that we'll need to resolve, not now, but down the road. Like, do we want to like have some level of consistency across the docs, or once people have maintainership over various projects, even if they're inside of Lando, should it just be up to them to do it however they see fit? But I think that's a question that we'll have to. Yeah, I mean, my intuition is moving. If we have people who have a complete, say like down the road, I'm just gonna name him, but Aaron is like, I want to own the Drupal repo. I want to be the maintainer of that. And he's doing a great job, and he feels that he like wants to have the Drupal docs look a certain way. My intuition is that we should just let him do that. Maybe there's some like very small requirements like using our theme or something, but beyond that, I feel like the people who are responsible for the various repos at the end of the day should be they can structure the docs however they'd like. I am a little bit nervous that we end up in a MySpace situation there, where it's like they're just like, okay, like I didn't mean that meant like Nyan Cat background on, on the site or whatever. So I think there's some risk there, but I think ultimately, like if we're serious about growing the project, like I think I'd defer towards empowering people to make their own decisions over, more of a top down, like the docs must look like this in all circumstances sort of model.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Steph, did you have a question? I think you might have been the next person in the queue, if I'm managing a queue here.
Just a really simple one. Contributors channel in the Lando Slack is still the optimal place to hang out?
Yeah, I think so.
I think so.
Or
I think
less?
so. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's not. I mean, hopefully after we start doing more actual contributor meetings and people are, being added to repos and pushing code and stuff, maybe that I hope that channel will become more active. But right now, I feel like it's not super active. But like, I think that probably is the best place to be.
It's a good place to start.
Yeah, I think so. there was like some, like Alec and I were chatting a little bit about like maybe we should move to like Discord or something. So like that, I mean, there might be like another place at some point, but I don't know.
But we
I
don't
think
need
it's
to
probably
solve
the best place
everything
for now.
today.
No, we don't. We don't. Well, I mean, like we could. If you're
we
game,
could.
Steph.
Well, you know,
But if you have a,
I've got
if you have
I've
a
got an
proposal,
opinion about
I'm listening.
well, I've got an opinion about governance of the documentation. I'll put that in the contributor channel.
Yeah, I mean, you should come to the governance meeting then, because I feel like the docs are tricky. There was a great issue that came in the other day that was basically just like your docs are terrible, go to hell, which I thought was,
The docs
like
are not terrible. Oh my gosh.
I don't think they're terrible, but I
Compared
do
to
think there's
what?
like right. I mean, good point. I mean, obviously docs can always be better. They're an unsung hero and often neglected. And we are like in an in-between space. So I like some of his like concerns, I think we're not totally out of left field, although like maybe his communication style would have been better served by not like immediately being like F you guys. But
Yeah. Hey, throw me
like,
in that
yeah.
room then. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like docs governance, I think is a good question. For the same reason that Ethan raised, because like I think it's great that we have distributed all the stuff into like smaller repos, including the documentation, but that there is now the like, okay, how do we solve the problem of now assembling all those pieces together in a coherent sort of experience? And I don't think that we really have the answer around how best to do that right now. And to some degree, I think maybe a better answer is like I definitely am like leaning towards and this like dovetails off my answer to like Ethan, which is maybe we shouldn't be trying to provide a coherent experience. Maybe each plugin should just have its own documentation, and that way, like the expectation is like, oh, these actually are different sites. They're not part of some giant site. I think maybe in people's minds, the expectations around the organization of it might be a little bit clearer. Sort of equivalent to like going to the npm site and then going to like an individual npm package that has its own README. Like the npm site is like a coherent thing that talks about npm generally, and that would be like the Lando core docs or whatever. And then like, but right now we're making it seem like the plugins are part of that, and really they're more equivalent to like an npm package now, where like the person who makes the package should be able to create their own docs. And I don't think we know for sure what we want to do yet, but I think that there's definitely some interesting like we should try to get clarity around like where we want to go there, because I don't think that we have clarity on that right now. Like the docs are put together now basically just to like, it was the smallest delta that we could. We didn't want to have a huge overhaul of the docs, so we sort of stitched them back together the way that they sort of were.
Mm-hmm.
But like it's not clear whether that's the best long-term plan.
I got you. Thank you.
Sure.
And I think, Chris, you were the next person that raised their hand.
Hi, folks. I hope this question isn't too in the weeds, but I was wondering if there was any interest from the community so far about Ruby on Rails plugin for Lando. I know there's a Ruby service, but it's a little out of date, and like the version is a couple of years old.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the core, I think, initiatives of Lando 4 as a thing is to just make creating services a lot easier and more powerful. So I think a lot of the lack of development of given services is just us waiting for that to be ready so that we can make them easier. But I mean, I think once that framework is released, and that's mostly on me to do, and there's documentation around it, like I like our hope is that people will just take that documentation and be like, oh, it's actually super easy for me to make a Ruby on Rails recipe or to update the Ruby service, and the maintenance of it is a lot less than like it is currently, and people will just make these things ideally on their own, and then maybe if they become sufficiently popular or well known, we can bring them inside of Lando or make them official or whatever. But we're hoping for that kind of model. Like one of the problems of like the centralized sort of system that we have now is, Lando could theoretically run anything, and that's sort of why we have a lot of the projects that we do to demonstrate that that's true. But like we're still fundamentally boxed in by like the personal knowledge of me and Alec and like a few other people. And so I think the goal is to like, okay, we need to like make it easier to do these things and write better docs around them so that people that have better domain expertise are the ones maintaining these things. Because ultimately that's going to be better long term. So like I think, for example, one of the services that I'm particularly interested in making once, and like probably maintaining myself once we start to have a more obvious like Lando 4 service that people can build on top of is local stack, which I think a lot of people are using now for like AWS Lambdas and that kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, like I think we're very interested in a lot of the plugins where we don't have immediate domain expertise. I think once these Lando 4 services are available, like if people are interested in just taking those things and running with them, like that would be super great. I think
Well,
I personally am very interested in that. Like, so anyone who's interested in any of the like less popular Lando spaces, I think that you should just let us know, because as soon as those things are ready, I think like there's room for you to take over right away if you so wish.
Yeah, and hopefully this contributor framework, and this is one of the reasons we're starting this now, is that, you know, hopefully a lot of you that are interested in contributing are going to be getting immediate experience with making Lando v4 services. And I'm guessing some of you too might be interested in extending Lando into areas that, yeah, like, you know, Christopher, maybe you're like somebody that's like, yeah, I want to make this Rails plugin recipe and, you know, move with that and start, you know, bring it into the Lando fold, get some more contributors built around it, get a team built around it. So it's not just you that has to lift the entire sky. So hopefully all these things kind of move together.
I'll also just like our thinking around. So we're not the Lando 4 recipes that we want to do are still like sort of down the road just because of the way that we have to like roll certain things out. So that would be like a breaking change. So it's going to require like actually the Lando 4 core and the Lando 4 CLI to be ready. But the Lando 4 services, which are like obviously the foundational to all the other pieces, those will start coming out pretty soon. I think probably in our next probably would be like I think we're on 21. We're about to do 321. It'd be like 322 probably. Once that is out, then we can start to redo all of this, at least the services using this new framework, which will be like I think people will be really excited when they see it, because it's going to be like a lot easier and there's a lot more powerful. And we're not going to have things where people are like, hey, you need to add the node, like you have to add node 22 to this. It's just will probably just work out of the box, which will be slick. But just to like give you guys an idea about where the recipes are going is what will happen with recipes now is the Lando init command will only generate the Lando file. Now it won't do any of the other stuff that it does. Those will be separate commands. So like pulling in code in those and creating new projects, those will be separate commands. So Lando init will just be recipe generation. And the way that recipes will work now is instead of having a sort of complicated internal selection of, basically right now I think recipes, they create Lando files sort of behind the scenes. What it will do now is it will explicitly just generate a Lando file with the correct settings for that recipe. So Lando recipe generation now will basically just be creating template files with various inputs that the user can give. And then they'll live at like a Lando Lando, like for Drupal, you would do Lando init, you'd get a bunch of interactive thing, and like I think we can do a lot of cool automation around it too. Like, oh, I see it. This is Drupal 8. I see that you have an Apache file. I see that you have like the Solar plugin or whatever, and I see that you're running we can do a lot of like automatic discovery, I think, but ultimately we'll print out a Lando file for the recipe that's just like .lando.drupal.yaml or something that then your normal Lando file overrides. So recipe generation is going to be a lot easier for people. You're not going to have to like know a bunch of Lando in and outs. I think basically you just have to write, okay, like what interactive questions do I want to ask the user so they can configure this particular recipe, and then take those answers and just like they replace values in a template, and that's the recipe. So that should be very easy to do, and we're very excited to do that, but it is still sort of like down the road a little bit.
Michael, yeah, I think you were the next person in line. And I see there's a question from Ed, actually. I didn't realize this, but if you guys click on like the square triangle fun block shape thing in the lower right-hand corner, at least on my screen it is, it says activities. There's a Q&A thing in there. So if you want to type Q&A, that's also, I wasn't familiar with that. But Michael, yeah, did you have a question?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. My question is in a way tied to the previous question, to previous comment. It has more to do with level of commitment expected from, say, if I join one of these teams, because I can imagine that some teams might get about, say, 20 people and others say have about 2. And either way, when you have 20 people, you don't have without some kind of guidance document on how to manage 20 people or how to manage 2 people in case one is picking up most of the slack and then they, for some reason, they get family issues or whatever. You can imagine one or the other thing, they fall off or drop off or they are not available to fix something. What mechanism do we have in place to make sure that that there's continuity and that it's not I mean, we don't get a situation where everything is really the burdens on just a handful of people while the whole group has 20 people, or the group is just 2 people and one person is the one taking most of that, doing most of the work or taking on most of that slack. So my question is, what kind of mechanism do we have in place or have you put in place to make sure that we don't get into a situation which will compromise at least the application?
So just to be clear on that one, it sounds like there's kind of almost 2 questions in there. One is, what's the level of commitment that's expected out of, your sort of everyday contributor? And then the second one was, hey, if, the classic project, both open source and non-open source, like project problem, if we have people that were big parts of the project that were doing lots and lots of work, but then they have to decrease their commitment for whatever reason, how do we make sure that there's not a big gap in terms of knowledge, or just effort, right? You have somebody that's doing a bunch of work and then suddenly they're gone and bugs aren't getting fixed, issues aren't getting answered, et cetera. How do we fill those gaps, make sure there's continuity? Were those kind of, does that summarize it?
Right.
Okay, cool. Mike, do you want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, I mean the level of commitment thing. I mean, I'm this is volunteer work. It's a free and open source project. We're not paying any of you. Although in the future maybe that could happen for some people who are interested. So like the level of commitment is whatever level of commitment you want to give. I'm not going to ask you to do more than that. I don't think that I should. I mean, it's a free and open source project. It's volunteer work. And that answer, I think, directly probably links to your second question, which is like, what do we do? And I mean, I don't think there's much we can do because of that. I mean, if you were a paid for contributor, then like, yeah, I mean, I would have expectations around you like doing X, Y, Z. And if you didn't, then you would not be paid anymore, like a more traditional employment sort of situation. But for volunteers, I mean, like, I think that the only thing that we can really do is, if somebody is in that situation, they need to communicate that to other people so that we can make plans in those circumstances to replace somebody or to like make sure that they're not, their work can be covered. And like to a large degree, that's an art form more than it is a science. So I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure that, people who are doing, I think, strategically important work are, as best we can determine, going to be available to do that work, for a decent amount of time. And once they're not able to do it, that they're able to communicate that they're not able to do it. Ideally with some kind of time window so we can find someone to replace them. I would say like the immediate fallback is that it probably falls on probably mostly me. I mean, I have decent domain knowledge across many things. So like, I can probably at least like do an adequate job filling in for somebody whose knowledge has departed. But like, I don't want to do that. So I'll be resentful if I have to do that. So like, I think the best thing that we can do is commit at the level that you feel you can. And if that level of commitment that you've expressed doesn't end up matching reality, communicate that to us as soon as possible.
Yeah, I mean,
and that we assign strategically important, jobs to people who I think we trust to be there for a while. But like, if they're not, like, life happens. This is volunteer stuff. I don't think that we can be dicks about it. So I think communication is being open and honest about your situation is probably the best thing possible.
yeah. And like, in the end of the day, it's going to be, hopefully it's what you owe to the other people you're working on the thing with, right? So if you're, working on a really popular plugin with a few other people, you've become a key contributor. I think you're going to probably, hopefully have a good rapport with those other people and feel like you owe them a little heads up. If you're having to take a step back from things, and definitely encourage people to not bite off more than they can chew, because we've all seen the giant blog posts from open source contributors who burn out.
Yeah.
And like, that's just sad. Like, we don't want anyone to be in that position.
Yeah, I've seen that movie many times. So, if somebody comes into a contributor meeting, and like the first thing they say is, I want to tackle this huge issue, I'm going to be a little skeptical, for various reasons. So I feel like, there's a natural sort of just like trust that you have to build with other people before you assign these big tasks to people. And, again, like, biting off more than you can chew is, we do that we're humans. We want to do more than we know. So I think the biggest thing is, like, once you realize that you've bitten off more than you can chew, you got to tell people right away so that we can sort of move it around, and no hard feelings. But like, yeah, if you say you're going to do X and then some big task, and then 3 weeks later you've done nothing, I'm probably going to check in and be like, so do we need to like move this around to somebody else or what? So yeah, I think just like, honesty with yourself and with others is the most important thing. And as long as we're doing that and realize that this is all volunteer time and treat each other like adults, then I feel like we'll probably be okay.
Do you have any follow-ups on that, Michael?
That's fine. Thank you.
Cool.
Yeah, I wish I had a better answer for you. Like, we have a system in place that make sure everyone does what they're supposed to do, but I've never heard of such a system.
We have AI replacements in the works for all of us.
Right,
it's
exactly.
Going to take human society probably another decade or so to really like perfect it. So we'll wait till then.
We'll toss it to the AI and see how they do.
So we got two questions in Q&A. I don't know if you're looking at this, Mike. Like,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah. Answer Ed's question. Yeah, absolutely.
And maybe actually let's, just for anybody, I don't know if everyone found that feature, but Ed's question was if there's a plan to add an example plugin repo to show, how you make a repo, or if people just need to work off of existing plugins for figuring out how to do that.
Yeah, so we definitely want to do that, Ed. That's been like a thing that we've wanted to do for quite a while. I think maybe a few years ago, Dustin, who I don't think is here, but you've probably seen in the Slack if you guys are in the Slack, did create like a Lando 3 version of this. And I don't think we ever made it public because we just never, I think, really got it to like a sufficient level of completion. But for Lando 4, we absolutely want to do this. And I think the form that it would take would actually be like if you're familiar with GitHub, they have repository templates. So there'd be a repository template. There might even be some like Lando command around it to help you like I think Yeoman, I don't know if Yeoman is still a thing, but Yeoman back in the day for node tools, it would allow you to scaffold out projects and stuff. So you get like an interactive prompt of like the things that you want. And then it would sort of like populate a repo, a start state for you. So I think something like that. And I think the repo would have just like, like it'd have like like an example documentation set up in there. It would have some example like plugins and like services and like the YAML files you would need, and probably like some example testing, GitHub Actions testing, example like release pipeline for you, so that like you could just generate a plugin repo from that template, change a few things around, and then probably have it be a valid Lando plugin. Maybe not do much of anything, but it could be a valid Lando plugin that other people could ingest with like, some of the plugin management commands or with Lando setup or whatever pretty quickly. And If that does not sufficiently answer your question, Ed, then feel free to raise your hand or add additional context in the Q&A. So for project management, yeah, I mean, I think our intention. So Mario asks, any specific tool be used for project management or issues in GitHub project boards? Yeah, so I think to start, the intention is to just use GitHub issues and GitHub projects, which are also pretty good. I think they even have like Kanban boards and stuff now that you can do. I know that like for right now, I mean, Alec and I think will be running the majority of like the teams, but I think, if we're able to get to the point where teams become more and more, teams can branch off into smaller and smaller units with like different maintainers, then I think it to me, I think it makes the most sense for the maintainer to do it sort of however they would like to do. Obviously, there's value in consistency. So I think like, I know my intention for the things that I'm going to be responsible for, like Lando Core and the CLI and maybe some of the other plugins eventually, is probably to just continue to use GitHub issues and GitHub projects. It's a space I'm familiar with. Like we all have access presumably to GitHub and those things. It is an open source project, so I think there is some level of transparency, having the issues available for people to look at and stuff. I think that's good for like literally 99% of the things that we're working on. So I think that's probably where we'll start. And then, as other plugins, I think sort of drift further away from, core Lando contribution. If a maintainer is like, I really want to use Jira, I'm going to be like, why? But if that's what you want to do, go for it.
Yeah, and I mean, just on a practical note too, I mean, right now, one of the things that happens, so, it's really cool that we've moved into this kind of, I don't want to call it microarchitecture, but that we've, actually split up the mono repo. It has tons of advantages. But one of the things that was immediately obvious was like, hey, you got to like get the right issue to the right place. And most users aren't going to know immediately where to put an issue. And even it can be even kind of hard because like, say you have an issue come in that looks like it's an issue with the Drupal recipe, but it's actually a problem with the PHP plugin that the Drupal recipe uses. So there can be some tossing around of issues, and having everything on GitHub actually does really help with that, because it's pretty easy to just transfer over issues to other projects. And we even have some automation around that for like the tagging and other things of the issues. So I think Mike's like, as you can tell, we're, we definitely fall into the Jerry Garcia school of leadership, where we want to empower people to, to do their own thing, give them the tools to be successful, especially when it comes to open source contribution, right? Like this should be individuals taking ownership, but there are certain limitations to the tooling. And I think, it might be highly, unless big things change, it's probably highly recommended that folks are going to stay on the GitHub tool stack for project management, issue management.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all as like people who are in the open source space and probably have done contribution and just in tech in general. Like, I think we all understand the problems of decentralizing anything and democratizing anything, which is like it just becomes a little bit inconsistent and messy from things to things, but from thing to thing. But yeah, certainly for right now, like I think it would be like if somebody became a maintainer of a project tomorrow and they're like, I want to move it to Jira, I think I'd strongly discourage them from doing that. But in 2 years, if the the iOS Cocoa team wants to run their stuff in Jira, like I'm not going to stop them. But yeah, I think Alec, your point's excellent. I hadn't even really thought about the fact that we have to like, especially right now as people are moving from like thinking about Lando as a mono repo and thinking about it as an ecosystem, like almost all the issues still come into the Lando repo, and then we sort of triage them with automation to various sub repos. So,
which,
like,
by the way, triaging issues, great place for a contributor to help out with like identifying like, hey, this should probably go over here.
Yeah, and if there are, I think there's probably we don't have like a team that really is involved around issue triage and stuff, but we'll probably talk about it in like our governance meeting. So if people are more interested in just like helping, in issue queues or whatever, I'd encourage you to come to that meeting so we can do a deeper dive onto those things. So yeah, to follow up on Ed's question here, do new plugins get added to the standardized Lando project, or do you just create your own repo? As you can imagine, if everyone starts forking everywhere, it'll be difficult to locate plugins. Yeah, so I think my sense is that I guess where I would like things to end up in like 2 or 3 years to paint a picture is that I think most people who are interested in making their own plugins, I think would start by just making those plugins on their own. So like if I were to make a plugin, and I'm not associated with Lando in any capacity officially, like in these meetings or whatever, I just go to my personal Purog GitHub repo and I fork a plugin to there and I create the plugin, and then at some point maybe the plugin becomes popular. We can see it in our sort of like usage tracking that like, oh, like this, like whatever, people are really like hiving for the front page 97 Lando plugin. I never would have thought that, but like retro's a thing, so like it's really hot. Like maybe we can invite them, hey, like we see this is a popular thing, do you have any interest in making this like an official Lando plugin? We can bring it into the Lando org, we can add you to the team, and you can run it, and you can get the benefit of like having other contributors and stuff. So I think that will happen to a lot of things. So I think there will always be this like, well, this official Lando plugin space that's in the Lando org. And even on the documentation now, if you look at the plugins page, which is like pretty new, I think ultimately like we're probably going to have anyone who creates a plugin who wants to add it to like the docs page, they can just submit their markdown file, and it sort of becomes like an NPM registry sort of scenario where you can just, oh, I want to look for like, third-party plugins for whatever it is. Oh, here's 4 plugins that people have created. And then I got to like sort of go to their docs page. I mean, just like you would for a Drupal module or a WordPress plugin or, an NPM package or whatever, where you just have like, yeah, there's lots of third-party plugins and you got to sort of investigate which ones you think make sense and try them out. But then there is this like special garden of like, these are official Lando plugins that the Lando team maintains and we feel good about. I think that's like probably where I would like to end up there, because I think, again, there's only so much domain expertise that the Lando team itself has. And I think we should try to broaden that as much as possible. But, I think we should also allow people to just have like, yeah, Bob and Jill over here made their own plugin, and other Lando users can go to that page. They can even find it in our documentation. They can use the Lando plugin management commands to use it, to ingest it. And I think that's the thing. Yeah, let me know. Add some more comments if that doesn't answer your question. But I think that's sort of where that's where I'd like to go. I'm going to exert effort to try to get us there, but sometimes it'll be interesting to see how things happen. Maybe nobody creates plugins, and we as a Lando community have to create all of them. Maybe the Lando core version 4 stuff is actually good and I document it well and people like it and it's easy to use, and all of a sudden there's like 100 Lando plugins that we have no real control over. I think that's probably overall a good thing. Although like, yeah, we'll start to get some of the problems of any system that's like this, where you have, official versions of things and then third-party versions of things. Like the Docker Hub comes to mind. Like Docker maintains all of its own official images and those are great, but like, there's other PHP images available too that you can use. So I think it'll probably be something more like that. Or I think that the Backdrop team has like, these are the ones that we maintain, but there's also these third-party ones. It's a fairly common thing. I think that's probably where we'll end up. There's a question: is it time to move to Discord soon? Lando is almost the only product left on Slack. Yeah, we've chatted about this. I mean, I like Discord. I use it for other things. I think it probably is a better fit. I think the biggest challenge for us is just like, where does this, and maybe this is something that like, again, this could be a contribution thing that someone could set up a Discord server or whatever, and we can start to move people over there. But it's like, there's an economy of time that Alec and I have. And like, yeah, I think Discord's cool. I think it is probably a better fit. Like more open source projects use that than Slack at this point. There's probably more features that would be relevant to us, but who's going to do it? And who's going to take the time to set it up and transition people over, which is not a trivial task. So I think, yeah, it makes sense to move over to that. But, that would probably be a good question for our governance meeting, because, yeah, I mean, I think our Slack channel has a couple thousand people in it, if not more. So
I think it's like
you know,
3,000 or 4,000 people in it.
3 or 4 thousand people. So not a trivial change to get everybody to move over there. And we're going to have to operate probably both channels for a while, which is, you know,
Yeah,
I think in the worst case scenario, you're probably 2xing a lot of your, you know, your input. I mean, like there's other channels too. Like I think the Drupal Slack has a Lando channel, and like we were active in that for a while. But it's like if I'm active in all the Lando Slack channels that exist, it's like I'm not going to be doing anything else. So it's a big task. But I think in principle, yeah, I think both Alec and I probably agree that that's like ultimately where we want to end up.
yeah, and
But,
I would like
yeah,
to be honest. I personally would like to understand a little bit more because like it's hard for me to tell. Like the assumption that Discord is more popular, it's hard for me to actually like. I haven't done the research on that. I'm kind of guessing. Yeah, that's my personal perception is not like completely. You know, I don't know that. For me, I know it's kind of convenient to have everything in Slack because pretty much all the other organizations I'm involved with are on Slack. So I almost wonder if this is like a personal thing where it's like, yeah, if my work's on Slack and like this other thing's on Slack, then I'm just all on Slack. The reality probably is everyone's so distributed now. It's like, your work's on Microsoft Teams, you're hanging out with your friends on Discord, and then you got like your random whatever Lando Slack. So maybe that, yeah. Hopefully if there's a lot of people that are on Discord and we can eliminate Slack from their lives completely by taking Lando off of it, that'd be great. But yeah, at a certain point, we probably just need to make a call and move to it. I think it does probably make sense because if I'm correct, right, Discord has infinite conversation history for free, and that's like the thing that really matters. So that alone would probably make me be like, yeah, let's do the migration. Pantheon's still on Slack, yeah. So it just depends on who you're involved with. Like that is kind of what I'm guessing. For most people, it's like, yeah, we're all Slack or whatever.
Yeah, and for me, like the popularity of Discord is, I think, less relevant, more just like are the features that we would get as like a free and open source thing like better suited to what we're trying to do than Slack. Like even I think very recently, like Slack rolled back some of its features for people in our circumstance that I think we only have X amount of back scroll now and stuff, which like is kind of a bummer because there's a lot of good content in the Slack channel for people who are looking for help that now presumably is not there. So like if Discord allowed us to have infinite scroll or so say like a 10x back scroll or something, that by itself might be worth it. But yeah, I mean, I think more investigation. I mean, I like it when I use it for my stuff. I think at the end of the day though, like whatever we do, I want there to be, I would prefer for there to be one because I feel like when you bifurcate it, it just gets a little bit difficult. I mean, it's nice to have like support for everyone's thing, but just purely from a support standpoint, I feel like the most benefit is going to happen when everybody's in one place and everybody can sort of see what's going on and help each other out. So I think that's my biggest concern is it's just going to take a while to move people off Slack onto something else. And, we're going to have to be doing an in-between thing for a little bit. And it's just going to be some overhead. Ed's follow-up question, how would a third-party plugin be defined? Would the official Lando project have a reference to somebody's GitHub plugin project? How would it be searchable? So the new Lando plugin management commands can use any valid NPM spec. So there's no like registering that you would have to do to be able to pull in somebody's project. Like if it's deployed to a registry, an NPM compatible registry like NPM or GitHub package manager or whatever it is, or it's a Git repo or whatever, it can automatically be ingested. So one potential search vector would be like, I just Google like Lando support for PHP 4 and I find Ed's PHP 4 plugin and it has like, this is how you install it. You run Lando plugin add, at ed/PHP 4, and now I have it. The other thing that we have too is in the main docs page, there is a plugins section now. And all the plugins that are there on that page are generated from markdown files that are just in the main docs. So if somebody wanted to if someone did want to register, like let's just say their plugin so that it's included in the main Lando docs, you would just have to submit a markdown file that has the metadata, which I think would basically be like, what's the name of your project, who's the author, give me a URL to link to, so that would presumably be the documentation, like the GitHub page, whatever it is. And then like some tags, of which we would probably include like, we want to like note that this is a third-party plugin, it's not a Lando plugin. So I think that would basically be you fork our template repo, you start to generate packages or whatever you want your deployment to be. Those are automatically ingestible by Lando, even today, just as using Lando plugin add or and then the npm string for it, or the Git repo or whatever mechanism the tarball, however you want to distribute it. And then if you wanted to add it to be searchable like in the Lando docs ecosystem, you just add that markdown file. So I think like ultimately, like probably in the template repo itself, we could have some instructions on like, okay, like what do I do after I fork this and get my plugin rolling and people are using it? What are some like next steps for me? And I think it would be like, yeah, like go to the Lando docs and submit your markdown file as a PR and we'll pull it in and your plugin will show up on our plugins page and people can find it that way. And, we can link it to your docs and, they can follow your instructions and use the plugin. Hopefully that answers your question. Yeah, I mean, if people want to ask more questions, I'm happy to stick around longer too. I don't have a hard stop. So if there's anybody else with other questions who want to raise their hands or post in the Q&A, happy to stick around. Okay. I thought for a while, Ed, that you were just gonna troll me with more and more questions to see how long I would answer them. So I appreciate that you ended with the statement.
Yeah, really good questions. Yeah, and I think this is it's good to see so many people engaged and interested. Definitely feel free to ask more questions. But I think, yeah, like Mike said, the follow up here. So I've been taking notes. That's why I've been like tip tapping away this whole meeting. So send out the notes, send out this recording to everybody, including everyone that wasn't able to make it, because we have a pretty significant interest in this meeting. And obviously, because Lando's a global community, not everybody is able to make a given time. Would be curious. I mean, and this might just be a follow-up poll that we need to send out via survey later. Just figuring out timing for meetings, especially as we get more of them. Hopefully that'll get a little easier and we're able to get to snag more people. If you're interested in just the plugins meeting, maybe we can get that group of people and try to dial in the time to make more people available. But yeah. So we'll send out all the follow-ups from this meeting, and I think the next thing will be just scheduling some of these follow-up meetings to get some of these first subgroups kind of started. Yeah, Mike, anything else that folks should know kind of going forward from this?
Yeah, I mean, just look for the email for these team meetings. It looks like Oscar maybe had a question.
Oh,
too.
yeah, cool.
Yeah, I mean, I'll try to wrap up now. That I could, people want to stick around for more, we could do that too. But yeah, I mean, thank you everybody for coming. I mean, like, we've put a lot of work in the last couple of years doing stuff that like has not been particularly rewarding because it's all very much geared towards just like how do we structure the project and like how do we create all these different actions to enable basically to get to where we are now. So the downside of that is we've sort of fallen behind a little bit on features and support and other things, and that's been unfortunate. But we're really it was super exciting and yeah, it was just super exciting to see the feedback that we got just for this meeting, to see people are still interested in contributing and they want to be involved. So thank you everyone for coming. Really looking forward to like some of these team meetings and starting to assign some issues and getting to know the people here who want to contribute who I don't know better. Because yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot about Lando 4 that hasn't come out yet. But like the stuff that is coming is I think very exciting. I think people are going to be very excited by what they see. A lot of it is, yeah, I mean, I think we're building basically a very easy to use general purpose sort of DevOps tool That's going to work with basically any kind of image that you want. I think it's going to be very easy to make recipes and services and stuff. I think people are going to be very excited when we have that stuff coming out, and should be coming out pretty soon now that we're wrapped up with this stuff. So yeah, thank you everyone for coming. Yeah, again, if people want to stick around for more questions, I'm happy to answer them until they stop. But yeah, I'll see you all in the meetings that we send out in the next week or so.
And yeah, for Oscar, for your question, so Lando, as you might have been able to see just from looking at the code bases as they exist, is it's primarily in JavaScript, primarily Node. So that's if you're looking to buff up on anything, that's probably good. Although it's a little bit different than if you're running if you've run like an Express app or something in the past. Obviously Lando is kind of a different use case, so it's a little bit different context. So yeah, Mike, I don't know if you have I feel like for me, the most helpful thing, so I've definitely gone through the learning curve of Lando more recently, because I've, over the last couple of years, gotten a lot more active in contributing, as we've kind of focused more on Lando as a project. And for me, the most helpful thing has just been, looking at Lando code, and trying to go through Lando issues and doing things. But Mike, do you have any advice on that? Yeah,
I mean, I would say if you don't have, if you have a decent background in JavaScript, you could probably jump in and help on some of the more specific issues that come up. And in the contributor meetings, I think we'll go through some hey, this is how you set up your your dev environment for the dev tool, and how you can do testing and that kind of thing. And I think that sandbox is pretty good for learning, and obviously you can ask people who are in the meetings on how to do some of that stuff. I would say that if you're not a JavaScript person or familiar with JavaScript or Node generally, I would probably discourage you from trying to learn Lando 3 stuff, because it probably would make sense to wait for some Lando 4 stuff to come out first and to jump on that. So if you're just coming in and looking to contribute for where we are right now, and you don't have that JavaScript sort of expertise, the DevOps stuff might be the most interesting stuff to look at. So we have I think 6 or 7 GitHub actions, custom GitHub actions that we use to manage Lando. So we have ways to prepare releases, to cut releases, to code sign binaries, to deploy stuff, to transfer issues. There's all the work around just distributing Lando, which is we have as of last week, we now have an installer script for Mac and Linux, but we're looking to add capacity for Homebrew and other distribution channels. All of that stuff is to a large degree shell bashy stuff. So if you have space in just bash scripts or PowerShell or GitHub actions, that space I think is pretty decent. But I would poke around. There's other repos too. So we have a whole custom theme that's a BytePress theme. Again, that's JavaScript too, but it's more ESM JavaScript stuff, so you might be more familiar with it. But the theme generally has there's bugs that come in for that every now and then, and there's places to work there, obviously documentation. But I think, yeah, if you're just coming in and you don't know JavaScript, I think I might consider coming to the DevOps meeting, because I feel the GitHub actions are if you have some knowledge of DevOps principles and just shell scripting in general, I feel GitHub actions is pretty accessible, and their documentation is not too bad. So that might be a good place to start.
And we'll send out, we'll send out a notification on when that DevOps meeting will be happening. So that'll be part of the follow-ups here.
Yeah, and speaking of that, Aaron, if you want to ping, I don't want to make this a meeting just the 3 of us, but if you want to, Alec and I will ping you on Slack, because you probably noticed that we rolled out the POSIX scripts, installer scripts, recently. So it'd be great to just sync up with you. Maybe we can do a hangout, whenever you're available, really. So just show us where you're at with your stuff, and I can show you sort of where we're at with ours. Then we can try to sync them together so that they're as consistent as makes sense. So I'll ping you on Slack and maybe we can set something up. But in front of the remaining people here, many thanks to you for doing that. I know that was not a easy task. The POSIX one was a lot more involved than I thought it would be, and it was like I remember showing it to Alec and being like, I have 600 lines of code that basically stop you from running these 5 lines, which really do all of it. And just being like, this is what it's like to write scalable stuff. It's like when you're going into it, you're like, oh, this will be easy. It's like 5 lines of code. And then you're like, oh yeah, but there's this that I have to consider, and this and this and this. And like, yeah, it's easy to write stuff that works for one person, and it's hard to write it for presumably the universe. So I don't know if you're going over your code quickly. Going over your code quickly, it looked like that was basically the same scenario for you too. So, and yours was actually more difficult than mine too, because you had to do the WSL part. So well done. I'm looking forward to like getting that in there, and then we can finally get rid of the package installers at least for now. So to anyone who's left, Aaron has the first major contribution probably to Lando ever. So I guess I should probably send you some whiskey or something, but or whatever if you're not a drinker. I mean, I think that you are, based on that we have had drinks in the past, but we'll send you something nice.
We all get old.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I'm on the sober train. Okay. Yeah, if there's not any final questions, we can. I think we could probably call it.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you.
First?
Yeah, cool. I think that's a wrap. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for coming. Really appreciate it. Looking forward to getting in these meetings and actually doing some real stuff. But thanks for coming, everybody. Thanks for your time.